Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. So I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and a warm welcome to those joining us online at CanadianClub.org. My name is Shazan Chu, and as President of Canadian Club Toronto, I'm delighted to be your host this afternoon. Today, we kick off Canada's Next Move, a national conversation series convening leaders shaping the future of our country. Our focus this afternoon is on one of the great levers of nation building, infrastructure. From the railways that first connected us to the energy grids and digital corridors of today, infrastructure is the physical expression of our collective ambition. We're thrilled to host this inaugural event presented in partnership with Build Canada, a nonpartisan, mission-driven movement focused on making Canada the most prosperous country in the world by unlocking our full potential through bold ideas, ambition, and action. To our presenting sponsor, Deloitte, thank you for supporting this initiative. And to our season sponsors, the Canadian Bankers Association, and our official airline sponsor, Air Canada, and our nature partner, Canada's Forest Trust Corporation, thank you. Your support helps us make this gathering and our entire season possible. Welcome to the students joining us today from TMU's The Dais. We're glad you're here. Where's our student table? Now, I'm sure you'll have questions about the future of infrastructure in Canada. Please use the Q&A cards on your table and raise your hand so our team can collect and pass them to our moderator. For those joining us virtually, please click the Q&A button on the side of your screen. Our team will keep an eye out for those questions too. In addition, I've been told that at 12:55 p.m., there will be a nationwide emergency test on our mobile devices. It'll be a very brief intermission as we acknowledge that alert, and then we will go back to our regularly scheduled program. Thank you. Now, to formally introduce our panel, I'm pleased to welcome Jordan Izenga, Partner and National Infrastructure and Real Estate Leader at Deloitte. Jordan brings national insight and a deep expertise in working with both public and private sector partners on complex long-term infrastructure investments. Welcome, Jordan. Canada's podium is yours.
So I guess I have no choice but to speak relatively quick. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today for the, I think, first or second installment of the Canadian Club's Canada's Next Move series in partnership with Build Canada. As mentioned, my name is Jordan Izinga. I lead Deloitte's efforts in the infrastructure space here in Canada. I want to start by saying something that I think is obvious, which is that despite infrastructure being a priority for successive governments, Canada has continued to struggle to build things that most people want to see done. Many of those in this room work in the built environment and have the scars of trying to develop important and, yes, nation-building projects. It has not been easy. Fortunately, it feels like change is in the air. There is a palpable acknowledgement that the status quo of doing things is just not acceptable. It's now clear that senior government officials are committed to removing the duplication in our regulatory framework. And officials understand that there are cultural changes needed for government to move from a mindset in which they question whether a project should be developed to how it can be developed. After all, we are in an economic crisis. We need to diversify our trading partnerships, and of course, time is of the essence. And that's why I'm excited to introduce our panel of senior leaders who have worked across the public and private sector, delivering infrastructure from data centers to pipelines to roads to hospitals and beyond. This panel will discuss how strategic infrastructure investments can boost economic growth, improve productivity, promote regional equity, create Indigenous partnerships, and strengthen national unity. And they will speak to all of this in 30 minutes. Our panelists are Greg Grant, an Executive Vice President at TC Energy, where he is responsible for TC's power gen and unregulated natural gas storage business. Dan Jolivet, Ellis Don's SVP for Life Science and Technology. Andrew McLean, a Senior Vice President at Fengate, where she is responsible for oversight of construction operations of each of Fengate's infrastructure projects. And finally, we have James Bradshaw, who I just learned I went to Queen's at the exact same time with, so I will be looking back at my photos from 2002 to 2006 to see if you're in those. And we have James Bradshaw, who will keep us all honest as he covers the institutional investment beat. Please join me in welcoming the panel to this stage, and thank you again for being here.
Where's the little bar there? Well, first say thanks to Jordan for the introduction, and we'll sign each other's yearbooks later. I really want to thank all of you for coming to join us today, hear this great panel. I was really happy when I was asked to come and play a small role in this, because this question of how to sort of build Canada through infrastructure has occupied an awful lot of my time and attention over the last couple of years, really. And, you know, we've had a change in government. We've had the build up to this very highly anticipated budget, highly anticipated because they built it up a lot. You know, coming out of that, as I talked to business leaders, I got a lot of, yes, this is a step in the right direction, and the tone is changing meaningfully here, but it comes down to execution. And so right on schedule, we have the Canadian Club with you know, a series here called Canada's Next Move, and I think that's what we need to talk about now is the next move, because the government has given us this framework and this vision, and then they have left it to you guys to make it happen and to get down to the nuts and bolts of it. So I think as a journalist trained not to bury the lead, I'd like to just start there broadly with this moment that we are in for trying to build and expand infrastructure in Canada, and to ask you, when you think about the way the table has been set with a major projects office and a list of projects, with a new set of tax incentives, with a decent envelope of new infrastructure spending in the budget, and a new tone out of Ottawa, will this help? Do you feel like you have the tools you need as builders and investors to start getting shovels into ground? And how do you sort of take that baton from Ottawa and start to turn all this engagement and discussion into action? So maybe if I can start at the far end with Dan, you can give us a project level perspective from Ellis Don.
Yeah, thanks. So I think, the federal government has announced the Major Projects Office recently, and then the federal budget has put a significant emphasis behind the nation-building projects, which is fantastic. And I think those are big projects. They're huge. They're nation-changing projects in terms of critical minerals and energy. And what will be interesting to see is how that execution happens in terms of allowing these projects to get a shovel in the ground more quickly. And then more broadly speaking, I would say that outside of those nation-building projects, there's still work to be done, certainly from our perspective, from my perspective, in terms of the competitiveness from a permit and a regulatory process, particularly at the provincial and the municipal level. Most of the projects that certainly I'm involved with is a lot of private sector money, and we're competing with the U.S. in terms of some of the clients that are wanting to build in the data center world to support the AI infrastructure. And right now, the feedback that certainly I get from my clients is we're not competitive when it comes to those permitting, the utility, and the speed to market in order to get those done.
And Andrea, I mean, as an investor in the infrastructure space where predictability and stability and vision into the future are prized, how are you feeling about this moment, and what are you looking for that would make you want to look harder at projects, to invest dollars in projects at this moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've talked to a lot of people before this panel started. I feel like I've had this panel already since I've been here. And I think everybody's on the same page. We do feel good about the budget. I think there's a lot of great stuff in there, tax incentives. The MPO is supposed to fast-track projects and bring people together and cut the red tape. All of that is good. I think it really will come down to execution. There is money to invest. We are keen to invest. We have investors from around the world, not just from Canada, and they would love to invest in Canada. But the problem is getting the shovels in the ground. It's the long lead-up time to get those projects moving, to get that money working. The Project Alto, the high-speed rail from Ontario to Quebec, great project, but we're looking at, when we were looking at the project, an 8-year project development period, right, to get through kind of the feasibility studies, environmental assessments, and all of the regulatory approval to get there. So when we were looking at it, we're like, it's not today's money that's being invested in that project. It's next decade's money, right? We're looking 10 years down the road for money, and we feel confident the money will be there. But if it's looking at today, no one's going to invest today because you can't put that money to work until you're in the actual project, and they're going to invest elsewhere, right? So we really need, and I've heard in the announcements as part of the budget that they plan that project specifically, they plan to cut that project development period from 8 years down to 4, which is great. I mean, that is a great step in the right direction, but now we have to see it happen, right? And the federal government is kind of putting everything behind this. They're really committed to this budget, which I think is fantastic. But there are, as Dan said, there are other layers, right? We need the provinces to sign up. We need the municipalities to speed through the permitting. So this is only one piece of the puzzle, I would say.
Okay.
But I am feeling good about it.
Dan, are you running up against the same problem? Is it a lot about speed? Or sorry, Greg is what I meant to say. Greg, are you running up against the same
I'm sure
issue?
Dan has an opinion as well. I'm just happy the Leafs broke their losing streak last night, because having Bo Bichette pass on a contract and the Leafs on a losing streak, I thought we'd get a rough crowd today. I think we've all been talking about speed to market. We're competitive. We're competing against people globally. We're seeing energy, commodities, minerals all becoming front and center. And people talk a lot about the data centers and the AI, but we're still bringing economies up to speed in third world and Asian countries, developing energy security for other people in the world, which I think is important. I think what we've seen, which we're very positive with some of the developments as well. some of the suggestions that have actually come through, we're generally federally regulated. So we've been working with NRCan and they're
Right on schedule.
Good to know it's working.
Yeah.
all right.
We have an infrastructure emergency in Canada.
Did somebody read that to make sure that it's still,
It is the
still a test? So I think with some of the work that we've been doing with NRCan and the federal government, to me, it's not about shortcutting the process. It's actually was getting alignment. So we made suggestions in the major project office, getting the right capabilities into the bureaucracies and the policymakers to actually help. You can't tell people to get it done early without supporting them with resources to help with that. We had an example of a project that was about 40-kilometer brownfield pipe that we worked through where we had ECCC, CER approval, we had DFO, and I'm missing one, it was land, I believe. That took us over 3 years to get approval for 40-kilometer in-corridor pipe. If you look at just running that parallel in a process or a parallel process, we could remove at least a year. So this isn't about shortcutting, this is about working more efficiently, being more productive, and allowing us to continue in that path. So we're very happy with the federal process. The only thing that maybe on Dan's point, if you're the 12, that's great. We want to make sure that the other 500, so I've heard, that have been added are also we're working within the existing regulatory framework to help those smaller projects as well that may not be on the national building list.
And what's interesting, like those smaller projects that, you know, at least I'm referring to, they're still billion-dollar projects, right? Like they're not these, they're not $1 million projects, right? But that's just the scale of what we're talking about. So.
And I do want to ask, do any of you see any risk in creating this sort of fast lane for the major projects, this privileged tier? Is there any risk for the rest of the projects that we don't see the same level of urgency around them, we don't see them made more efficient in the same way, and we don't maybe see the same level of investor interest in them because they're not on the privileged list? They're seen as second tier at this point. This is a concern that someone at a major pension fund raised with me in private. Is there anything to that? How do we think about the rest of the nation building that we need to do outside of that headline list?
I'm happy to kick off, because we've had some really good experience here in Ontario. So it's great to see the movement from the federal government and how they're working, but it goes to all provinces, and it's the first time in my career in 30 years that I've actually seen rights holders, local communities, provincial, regulated, like we get it. We need to provide energy security. I think the Russia-Ukraine war has really highlighted how important energy security is around the world. And we've had great support here locally. We're developing Bruce Power. We have our Bruce C expansion project that we're working with. Our Ontario pump storage project here, just up in Meaford. Provincial government has provided early development funding, federal funding coming out of NRCan. And so while not on the major project list, when people get that energy security is important and core to economic security, we're seeing some of those benefits. So it's amazing to see that with cautious optimism.
Right.
Because I think they're providing development dollars, but that doesn't, we're not hitting the FID yet where we can bring partners in with funding, but it's nice to see the early development dollars are supporting that.
Yeah, I think it is a risk that there's going to be the chosen projects and the not chosen projects. I'm hoping that's not at the detriment of the not chosen projects, and because we do get them through. Like Fengate, we're a mid-market investor. We don't invest in very many nation-building projects of that scale, right? We do a lot of hospitals and courthouses and transit that would not make it onto that list. I'm hoping it doesn't become a two-tiered system where everything slows down. I don't think it will be. Like, I think there is alignment. I think Canada as a whole is coming together and realizing the importance of building our infrastructure, especially in light of, our different relationship with the United States, that we're really, it's a moment, right? We need to seize this moment. Things have changed for us, and we need to build our own sovereignty. We need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. And I think the nation building projects are important, but our people are important. We still need hospitals, we still need schools, we still need all of that infrastructure as well. And I hope that this is just really a wave, like a momentum, that's going to trickle down through the provinces, through the municipalities to help get shovels in the ground faster.
Right.
Yeah, I actually think it needs to be the opposite, because I don't believe we're competitive enough right now outside of the nation building projects. So if that were to slow that down, then that would be a really bad thing. I think for in order for us to be competitive, I think it's great, but I would really encourage if we can take that approach somehow at the provincial and municipal level and coordinate that better to have that same speed in a broader sense, that you don't have to be a nation building project in order to, and I think in order to speed that process up. And I really think that's important for where we are right now in the world and for the economy.
And when we talk about that alignment for your clients, do they look at it and say, yes, this is great, you've got a national strategy, but my choke points are at the municipal level or at the provincial level? You know, what am I going to see? Is that part of the concern? I'm trying to get at why we still have this perception that we are so much slower than other jurisdictions for developing these projects.
Certainly the feedback I get, I don't think it's perception. I think it's reality, for sure. And certainly the clients that, I work with day in, day out, they're probably not even really aware of some of the nation building projects, right? So for them, they just see dollars, investment, return on investment, and where to do those dollars. And a lot of, certainly my clients, whether they build in the U.S. or in Canada. I mean, that's certainly the clients that I deal with, and it is easier for them to proceed and get a quicker ROI in the U.S. right now than it is in Canada.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about digital infrastructure and artificial intelligence, which I think is driving a lot of the infrastructure investment that we're seeing these days, and is going to be really important for Canada. I was at the Canadian Club not very long ago listening to the Prime Minister, and one of the things that really caught my ear that he said was he was asked a question about pipelines, and we'll come to energy, and I don't mean to minimize it, but he slightly waved it away and said that, you know, the effect we're likely to get from digital infrastructure and AI will have a much bigger impact on productivity in this country and on our standard of living. And we can agree or disagree about that. But maybe I'll start with you, Andrea. From an investment perspective, I know you did a pretty significant transaction in the data center space not very long ago. How do you feel about the opportunities for Canada that are in front of us, and also the risks in what has become a pretty frothy and fast-moving market?
Yeah, we've gone all in on data centers. We invested in E-Structure. They're a company out of Quebec, but they are now Canada-wide. They're building data centers. We first invested in them in 2017, so 8 years ago, through our private equity. Because we saw, like, early on, right? We saw early on there's some real potential here, so we invested there. And then in 2021, we kind of re-upped our investment. Our infrastructure arm, one of our infrastructure funds, invested in them for $1.8 billion with a number of co-investors. So huge transaction for us. We think, and I think everybody thinks that AI is the future, right? It's happening so fast. We see it in our day-to-day, right? That people, I think it's happening faster than we can keep up. We don't even know where it's going to bring us yet, because it is moving so fast and itself kind of scary, but a reality. So data centers for us is huge, because we see a lot of potential and a lot of growth in that area, specifically in Canada, as we look at, sovereign cloud, right? That's kind of where we want to be. And I think in light of the U.S. relationship, again, we want to be more like sovereign, stand on our own 2 feet, but I think that's not new either. You know, I've worked in healthcare for ages, and Canadian healthcare data has to stay in Canada, right? Like, where are the servers located? Like, we have encountered this on our infrastructure, our hospitals, and like, where is the server physically? And it has to have protection. And that's just healthcare, but it's the same for government, it's the same for financial services. It's, you know, there are a lot of potential clients that need us to build specifically a Canadian sovereign cloud. We cannot rely on the US, right? And if we do, that is going to change our position in the world significantly. So we see tons of potential in data centers. First of all, it's a good climate for data centers. It's cooler than, like, you're not going to put them in Arizona where it's hot all the time. Cooling is a huge factor. We have, for the moment, abundant power, which is a huge part of data centers, and the majority of it is green. So Quebec, Ontario, BC are looking at green power, which is fairly affordable when compared to other jurisdictions. And even Alberta has some really interesting opportunities for kind of a hybrid model where you're connected to the grid, but you're also behind the meter, so you have a power source on, you know, and we can do gas plants and things like that. So there is a huge opportunity in Canada, but now we just need the ability to build, right? We need like the barriers taken out of the way so that we can get there fast enough, because I think AI is moving so fast that if we are not at that pace, we're going to be well behind. And I'm sure you have thoughts about that too.
Yeah, for sure. Because you know, the news flashes, in my opinion, are always, you're comparing, and I think that's maybe what you were referring to, but you're comparing a manufacturing facility to a data center, right? So a manufacturing facility will employ 2,000 people. A data center will employ a lot less. Mm-hmm. So, but I think it's a bit of a narrow view of it. You know, I believe we're in the 4th industrial revolution. The geopolitical situation is a lot going on right now. We're trying to build, we're trying to be sovereign, which includes sovereign data. If we do not build that out and be competitive in that marketplace, we're going to have to rely on other countries in order to do that. And I think that's where probably, if I were to guess, Prime Minister Carney meant, because the spin-off of building the infrastructure in order for the digital infrastructure to compete in today's market or in tomorrow's market is critical to the economic benefits and the productivity gains that we need to do as a country.
And you mentioned that not as many people ultimately will work in those data centers, but it takes a lot of people to build that infrastructure. Do we have the resources, the manpower, the capacity to build what we need to build a sovereign cloud, to build that backbone in Canada?
It's a great question. So it's interesting what we saw from a trades perspective. During COVID, there was a lack of trades, and now there's a bit of a lull in a sense that it's easier to build right now. There are the unions, we're unions, we're unionized, full union, and certainly in this jurisdiction, and the union halls now have people available. However, when you read it or kind of project everything that's happening, there's about 20% of the workforce is projected to retire between now and 2035. There is the infrastructure, the large infrastructure build that between now and 2035, and a lot of those projects are just getting started now. So shovels in the ground, and the peak is going to be probably 5 to 10 years from now. So we are seeing as an industry a huge problem, a huge challenge in probably 5 to 10 years from now in terms of attracting and be able to sustainably have enough people to build out these projects, for sure.
Right.
I just wanted to add on that, because I think when you think about the digital infrastructure, then some form of power to produce it, then some connection to the grid, whether it's on the electricity, whether it's on the gas side. As you think about the major projects the follow-on projects and how that all pieces together. Like I'm sure you guys are hearing, but a lot of the major hyperscalers are getting like 27, 28 rush. How do we get there? And we're seeing across North America the speed upon which Mexico and the U.S. are going after these opportunities.
Yeah.
And like when you see nuclear being brought out, when you see coal being extended, to me it shows just how important energy security is. I know right now we have over 3,000 people at Bruce working on the refurbishment program. Some on my table here today are helping develop the Meaford pump storage. The thousands of people required for the major infrastructure that you'll be able to connect into, I think are really coming to head here at the end of the decade. And that's if you can get equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The lead times
There's a
on it,
huge 4 to 5 year lead time now when you think about power, for us to connect gas. Like we're about a third of the gas in North America. We have about 10 BCF of gas, which is about 50 gigawatts of power trying to come on over the next few years. We have to find a bunch of equipment for that. So that's, to me, one of the pieces for Canada to be thinking about when you have the US president underwriting $80 billion for 8 reactors without a location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're a bit behind. We have some dollars that we've been allocated to try to build. It's great to see federal support and provincial support on Darlington and some of the other projects. But when we really think about trying to compete with the US, willing to write checks, in China right now, still building 300 coal plants. They're building 30 nuclear reactors. There's a reason why the digital infrastructure, I think, is going to other areas, which to me is where we should be developing it here. We have some of the lowest cost gas. We have a significant zero emission grid for the most part. Like we have one of the best grids in the world as it pertains to renewable energy.
Also a great geopolitical system and a well-trained workforce.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
And if we step away from the data centers just for a moment in the terms of capacity, I think it is something Canada has to look at in terms of our big GCs, our big builders, right? So take, for example, the Peter Gilligan Mississauga Hospital, which has just closed recently. That's, over 2 million square feet. It's a $14 billion hospital in Mississauga, and they only had one proponent bid on it, and that was a JV of Canada's 2 largest builders, TCL and Ellis Don, right? Like and it's not just the workforce, which I think is like the skilled trades, we need to, a lot of them will be retiring. We need to grow that, perhaps we need to look at our immigration policies around specifically those skills, right? To bring into the country as we grow our economy. But I think it's also like the balance sheet. How many builders have the balance sheet to wrap a project of that size? Like these mega projects, are we setting them up so that we can have many interested parties so that everyone can participate? Or is it going to be so big that we can't handle it? Canada has only a certain number of large builders who can do these projects. And do we have to look at that? Do we cut the projects up into smaller pieces so that more companies can take bite-sized pieces of it?
Just to stay on the energy theme for a minute, Greg, I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit because we've got LNG Canada Phase 2 among the projects that have been announced. There's momentum and urgency, it feels, around LNG. You mentioned other projects like Ontario Pumped Storage as well earlier that can reduce our reliance on foreign supply chains and support jobs and so on. Can you just frame for me, what we have coming online in terms of power and to what extent does that give Canada an advantage in securing this investment versus other countries that might not be blessed with the resources we have? Is there a glass half full side of our pipeline, our capacity for developing energy right now?
Cautiously optimistic, I think is the word I used earlier. So we at one point in Canada, we had almost 20 LNG facilities that were being developed. Over the last 15 years, the U.S. has built out almost the entire production of Canada over that time frame.
Wow.
And so when you think LNG Canada, they're private numbers for the most part, but let's just say it's greater than $50 billion when you think of their upstream investment, the LNG investment, pipe investment. This problem in Canada, our resources are somewhat landlocked, so if you don't build the infrastructure, it's like building the rail 100 plus years ago. If you don't have some way to get it to market, where we're sitting on this unused resource. So this year, with LNG Canada, is the first time we brought on LNG in Canada in that 15-year time period. If you think about the GDP miss, royalty miss, tax risk, local employment, we've been spending a lot of time, First Nations communities along 700-kilometer right-of-way. The prosperity that you actually see that's developed along the right-of-way from some of these projects that are being developed, whether it's across northern BC, proud Manitoban, love that we're talking about the Port of Churchill, but figuring out how can we as Canada create the infrastructure and the network to get our products to market, I think is the important piece of it. That's for export, but I still look at, so Alberta, we mentioned Alberta. There's a 22 gigawatt queue right now for data centers in Alberta. It's been growing that way for the last couple of years. There's been no facilities FID'd. And you haven't been able to connect from a reliability and affordability perspective. There's a reason why the ISO has been somewhat reluctant on that. So you have cheap gas, you have a progressive province, but still nothing being done. And I think it's still, when you come down to having some of the policy stability, having a market to bring people where you can be successful as an investor, I think that's the important piece. And so I'm worried on both sides. I'd love to export more. I think we have a great opportunity, but we still can't even solve within Canada getting the demand here.
Okay. Let's touch on the balance of public and private investment a little bit and where the dollars are going to come from to fund this, because we've got some fairly big new public dollars pledged in the budget and through an expansion of the envelope for the Canada Infrastructure Bank and so on, but those will get gobbled up pretty quickly, I think. There's been a lot of focus on the large Canadian pension funds for obvious reasons and whether they should invest more here. I think the Prime Minister is touching down in the United Arab Emirates to try and pitch sovereign wealth funds there. But it feels like this is going to take a broader ecosystem of funding than just those very large funds. So Andrea, talk to us a little bit about what sort of mix of sources of private capital you see coming in here, and how do we get them enough certainty that they're willing to commit?
Yeah, I mean, the money is there. There is money to invest. We fundraise from across the world. So we have investors from Asia, from Europe, from the United States, and from Canada. A lot of our money comes from the labor-sponsored pension plans. So lots of unions invest in Fengate, and then we try to put their money to work and put their members to work. We see it as a nice circle, full circle. So there is money there, and our investors come in. We don't have like a Canadian fund and a US fund and a European fund, right? They're all coming into the same funds together, and they are definitely excited about investing in Canada. I think the money is there. I think when it really comes down to it is when we're making decisions as to what we're going to pursue in terms of investments out of our funds, which have a mix of investors from around the world. We're looking at it on an investment by investment basis, right? That project needs to make sense. We need to feel confident that it's not going to be canceled, that it's not going to be delayed, that it's not going to be held up by regulatory barriers for years and years and years, because we do have open-ended funds, but we also have many closed-ended funds. There is a timeline for that money, right? There is no decades-long investment horizon for these. We need to get that money to work right now and start getting returns immediately. So I think the money's there, and I think it doesn't all have to be Canadian pension plans. They certainly do their part. But I think we need to look at an investment by investment basis. How are we going to do that? And we talked a lot about alignment, federal and provincial and municipal, and getting through those barriers. But I also think what I've seen in my life, my career in infrastructure, is also a lack of alignment between governments from like one term to the next, right? So changes in parties, sometimes priorities have changed. We're all excited right now because this budget's come out and we feel like there's real momentum. But the tides do change, and 10, 11 years ago, I worked for Infrastructure BC on the George Massey Tunnel replacement project, which was the replacement of an aging submerged tunnel across the Fraser River. And that was like 11 years ago. And the business case was released in 2015, and the project definition report, and there was a ton of consultation with the communities, a lot of environmental assessments because it's crossing a river, all of those good things. They decided to go with a replacement bridge. It was in procurement. We had teams bidding on it, and then the government changed from the Liberals to the NDP in BC, and the whole project was halted. They paid off the bidders, right? They paid out honorariums. Everybody went away, and the reason they said was there was insufficient consultation, insufficient environmental assessments. And then if you fast forward to today, the project has relaunched under the NDP government. They're now going to do a replacement tunnel instead of a bridge, and construction slated to start next year in 2026. So, and it's supposed to be complete by 2030, whereas that replacement bridge back then would have been complete by 2022. So like we have lost almost a decade, right? And that there were investors in that, right? There were proponents who came with private sector capital to invest in a bridge, and it was on its way. And I'm not saying the bridge was the right solution and the tunnel's not as good or vice versa. Like it's not a commentary on where we ended up, but the commentary is on how long it took to get there. And that's the type of stuff that throws investors off. It throws us off when we're looking at opportunities. We're like, not that, right? There's no commitment to it.
Just wait till we try to build a tunnel.
We've had the same government for 10 years, and we're still waiting for clarity on ITCs. So
there you go. So, it's no win.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions that our audience has sent in while we've still got a bit of time left. One of the questions we had come in was that we spoke about time to permit being a competitive drawback versus investing in the USA. Are we otherwise competitive from a return perspective? Is this timing issue our only competitive drawback?
From a what perspective?
From a return perspective.
So from a return perspective, I think that that's maybe a question more for you than me. Certainly I can speak to from a schedule perspective and a labor perspective and an expertise perspective.
Please do.
Yes, we're very competitive in the U.S. So when I was actually having breakfast with a client just a few days ago, and they build in Europe, the U.S. and now Canada, and the comment was, in general, when you compare, U.S. is quite broad. You can get places like Texas versus Virginia type of thing, but if you look in the data center world, the cost to build in Toronto, for example, or Alberta, are very comparable to the cost to build in Virginia or some of these jurisdictions or in Europe. I would say that yes, we're competitive on that basis in terms of ROI. There's a lot more factors involved, so I don't know if you have a.
I'm happy to add one on this because we actually put out publicly. So you can have a look at our last Investor Day presentation. And for us, and we've said it very publicly, that we'd love to be investing more in Canada. And you can see the returns that we started with 7-8% unlevered returns. We're up to almost 12% unlevered returns on our footprint. That's all because of the U.S. Because it's speed to market in bringing projects on, and people are willing to pay to get service quickly.
Right, yeah.
And so we are seeing our investment across North America go towards the U.S. So it's not just regulatory. There's returns. There's other aspects to the investing. I mean, obviously, you would have experience on that side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about risk-return profile, right? Like what people will take more risk if there's higher returns. And I think you're right. In the U.S., there's just more speed. Like they're willing to pay to get things over the line, which doesn't seem to happen as much here. So the returns can be greater. Are they greater across the board? Probably not. It is a competitive market. If there's multiple bidders, people are coming in. If your cost of capital is exceedingly high, you're not going to win the project, right? You're not going to get the project. Somebody else will get it. But I would say that the U.S. market is putting an upward trend on it.
And there's a correlation between the timing and the return, right? If a project drags on, your cost of capital or your capital is tied up longer, your IRR is not as good.
That's exactly right.
The two go hand in hand.
And those are factored into our investment committee decisions, right? As we look at when is the money going to start bringing in a return. Like we understand it's not necessarily day one, but if it's, 10 years down the road, then that's not a great investment either.
And I think they see it as a bit, from an investment perspective, more risky, because if there's uncertainty on the timeline and uncertainty as to when you're going to be able to operate a facility and start earning revenue, that increases the risk profile, right? Whereas I think in other jurisdictions, there's more certainty. They know it's, 3 to 6 months, so.
So just with the time we have left, I'll take responsibility for this because I think we've been bumming some people out, because I've got a question here that says, can you share some positive stories? This feels, this feels a bit daunting and scary for Canada. And it is a daunting challenge, but we're going to finish with what makes you optimistic. And maybe I can go down with all three of you. I'll start with you, Greg, and head that way.
Sure. In all of that, I am actually quite optimistic. Like I said, this is the best I've seen it in 30 years. Traveled around the world in my previous roles, seen some of the same challenges we've seen here in Canada. Positive, we work quite closely with Cedar LNG and the First Nation-led investment. Silism and the Nishka are on the back of their PRGT pipe. There's some great momentum, and I think it's good to see what we're seeing from the federal government, provincial government, and most importantly, involvement of the Indigenous communities, and not just as a tick-the-box exercise. I think we all have a history of let's get through the consultation, but how do we partner? How do we ensure that there's an opportunity for all people to kind of benefit from these type of projects? And as we as Canadians can pitch the benefit of developing these type of projects across Canada. It's not an Alberta project or a BC project. We're Canadians. We have an amazing opportunity here. So I am quite excited and looking forward to some more of these projects coming online.
Yeah, same. I'm also quite cautiously optimistic about the budget and the direction that it's taking. I think it's as good as it's been for as long as I can remember, right? I think there's real momentum here to move us forward as a country. I read an article just this morning that said the CEO of the Montreal Port Authority about the Contrecoeur project that has been referred to the MPO. She has said it brought a focus to this project that she's not seen anywhere else, and that they are able to focus on what are the last few pieces we need to do to get this over the line, to get it moving. It was like really a resounding endorsement of the MPO, and I think that's great news. And if we can see more of that, just that focus and cutting down, as you said, like not cutting corners, but cutting down the duplication, having things run in parallel rather than sequentially, like that would be huge, huge, huge for the country. And everything else that we talked about, returns and getting the shovels in the ground and growing our trades, all of that will stem from that, right? From being able to kind of cut through that red tape.
Last thought to you, Dan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we're in incredibly complex, but super interesting times. I think the federal government has a real business positive approach and kind of cutting down some of the red tape and getting stuff done, which is great. It's really exciting. I think that the efficiencies of productivity that the AI and the technology is going to take the world in the next 10 years is amazing. I do think that it's an opportunity for Canada to go even broader and deeper in order to make sure that we win.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Let's lock arms and do it, and let's win. I think that's all the time we got, so I'll hand it back over to Shazan to close this off here.
Greg, Dan, and Andrea, thank you for your insights on how infrastructure can be a powerful lever for Canada's long-term prosperity. And James, thank you for guiding today's discussion with clarity and insight. As we look ahead, it's clear the question isn't whether infrastructure can shape our future, but how ambitiously we're willing to build. Once again, our sincere thanks to Deloitte for presenting today's event, and to Build Canada for partnering with us in the Canada's Next Move series. And thank you as always to our production partner, VVC Live, for helping us bring today's event to life. We hope you'll join us for the next conversations in this series that carry forward some of the themes that we've talked about today, Canada's edge in the global skills race, and rethinking regulation and tax for a more competitive Canada. On November 28th, we welcome a panel focused on democracy at work and why it matters, featuring Anthony Viel, CEO of Deloitte, Danny Asaf, partner at Torys LLP, and Anna Serrano, President and Vice Chancellor at OCAD. Please visit CanadianClub.org for information on these upcoming events, on-demand content, and how to become a member if you're not already one. Now, before we close, let me leave you with this question. What bold action will you all take to help shape our foundation for a stronger, more connected, and prosperous Canada? Thank you all for being with us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.